So you worked with Greg Ladani, you did Spinal Tap, and then I understand that you worked with Joe Cocker.
Yeah. And how did that come about? That's interesting. I was working with Greg Ladani in Steve Vai's studio, and the studio manager's name was Richard Landers, who's a dear friend now. And he said, "Oh, you got to meet my friend. You guys are going to get along so great. You know, he likes to ride dirt bikes, and you guys have that same East Coast kind of sense of humor." And his name's Chris Lord-Alge. So I said, "Yeah, I'd love to meet him." Well, this went on for months. I never did meet Chris. Finally, one day, Richard said, "Chris is looking for a piano player to help Joe Cocker. Joe Cocker needs to pick some keys for a record he's doing." So all he wanted me to do was come and sit down and find the right key for Joe to sing in.
Okay.
And, you know, half an hour into it, Joe's like, I'm saying, why don't you just change and go to, and do this and arrange? And Joe's like, "Oh, I rather like what this young man's doing here."
So you're so good with the impersonations.
Well, you spend that much time with somebody? Really, and Joe. Very sweet and dear, oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful man. And he saw right away that I was, I pushed some buttons with him, with the way I was changing keys and arranging things. What if we do the re-intro? And so next thing you know, I'm arranging his record. And I met Joe, and I'll never forget the first day I met Joe, or first day I rehearsed with him was January 18th, 1994.
Okay.
Because the big earthquake in LA was January 17th,
oh, wow.
1994. So that was the first day. And we did a great record with Chris Lord-Alge, who was amazing to work with. And the record was a huge success, and Joe asked me to go on the road with him. And, I don't know, 33, 35 countries we did on that run. And just became very, very tight. And a lot of the same tastes and things, and we talk a lot about politics and history and Zulu history, Australian history, very into geography and stuff. Anyway, but I'll never forget at the end of that tour, Joe and I were sitting in Amsterdam, and there's a restaurant we both love there called Purimas. And we would always go to Purimas when we were in Amsterdam. So we're sitting in this restaurant, and he said, "CJ, there's a interviewer who's going to show up, would like to ask us some questions." I said, great, no problem. So she shows up, and she's asking Joe questions. She isn't bothering with me because I'm just eating. And finally, she said, just to close with, you just did all these countries in this tour, this world tour. What were some of the best moments? And Joe looks at me, he goes, "What were some of the, And I'm thinking, and I said, "What about we played in Marbella, Spain, in a bull ring, and you could still smell the blood from the bullfight."
Ooh.
And the power was going out. So my organ is dropping like pitch. And I'm the only one, because the guitar player and the drummer, and everybody just, "Hey." And Joe's looking back at me like, he thinks I'm on drugs or something. So anyway, we go down all these stories, and now we're crying, we're telling these unbelievable stories. And then I went, "Joe, the question was, what were some of the best moments on the tour?" And we're telling all the worst moments. And that's when I realized that's what you remember. Mm-hmm. You don't say we had the perfect meal and I hit the perfect high note, and that's when you become tight, And that really changed my view on how I look at things. When things are bad or nuts or whatever, you go, "You know what, we're going to remember this. Let's get through this." And, Joe really helped me see that. Just a beautiful man. And that guy, hearing his voice every night through the speakers on stage, that's one of the great treats of my entire career. Mm-hmm. Genius.
Now I have to ask you, looking back on your life this far, can you talk about some of the worst moments that you remember the best now?
Well, we did Spinal Tap played the Freddie Mercury tribute. That was in '92. Don't say I wasn't born. I don't want to hear it.
I was born. Don't worry about
Okay, I
it.
don't want to hear any of that crap. It doesn't matter. It's good. And we came out to 90,000 people and simulcast to 500 million live. And the crowd screaming, tap, 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 tap. And Christopher, or Nigel Tufnell, goes to hit his guitar. Does one of these, and he turns around and he goes, I have nothing. I said, oh, don't pull this right now, don't. And I saw the blood actually, and he had nothing. Now, the stage crew comes over the rails and everyone's running, swarming around the stage. Well, the crowd thinks it's part of the act because it's Spinal Tap. And they're just like tap, 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 tap. But that feeling standing there was, I mean, it felt like 15 minutes.
Oh, man.
And what we ended up finding out is a very prominent guitar player from a very prominent rock band paid the roadies to clip our, he thought that would be funny.
No way.
It wasn't funny.
Man. Do you know who it was? You don't have to say.
I
but-
do.
How did you find out who
Yeah,
it
we
was?
can't say the word slash on the,
How did you find out who it was?
you know, how do you keep a secret like that?
I don't know.
You know.
He was probably proud of it, right?
So, anyway, it felt like 15 minutes, and I think we looked at it later. It was 1 minute and 10 seconds.
Oh, man.
You know, but those disasters, you know, you always get through them.
Yeah.
You always get through them. Have you ever seen Shakespeare in Love?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes, it always works. And why is that? And he goes, I don't know. It's a mystery. And it just always works. It always works. It's show business, you know.
Right.
The show must go on. So.
Now, do you have any moments where you can just sit back and say, I can't believe that it just all fell together perfectly?
A lot of it, yeah.
Those aren't the ones you remember, though, right?
Yeah, I just, you know, there's a thing about manifesting something in your mind, and the first thing I think of is Keith Emerson, who was, when I was 16 years old, I was sitting in the basement with my friends smoking a joint, and my friends got a Bee Gees record on LP. They used to have these vinyl things they would spin.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Okay, and. And yeah, we used to record on string, and no, anyway. So the Bee Gees record's playing, and his big brother comes down, and he rips the needle off, and he pulls the record off, and he smashes it on the coffee table. He goes, now I'm gonna play you some real big music. He puts this record on and puts the needle on, and we're like, hey, what are you doing? And I sat back, and it was Emerson, Lake and Palmer's first record. And it's just like, I remember where I was when JFK was shot, and I remember where I was when the man walked on the moon, and where I was when I first heard Keith Emerson.
Wow.
So he became my Jimi Hendrix, my James Bond. I learned everything he knew how to play. And fast forward to that same tour with that Spinal Tap, we're playing the Royal Albert Hall, which was a whole thrill in itself. And the manager comes backstage and she goes, oh, there's some keyboard player that wants to sit in. I'm like, well, what's his name? She goes, oh, I knew you were going to say this. It's like Keith. And I go, Emerson? Yeah, that's it. And I'm just like, oh. Okay, bring him back. And then through the door comes this James Bond. Nobody can be cooler than this guy. And nobody can play better than him. He just had everything. Well, we forged a friendship together.
Wow.
And, you know, started playing music together, and we were going to do a project together, a record together. And I guess how I got on this is just talking about manifesting when everything went perfect. And that's a lifetime of things going perfect, of still having that same energy that you put out there, which I think is so important. You know, the energy you put out there, what you attract. And if somebody would have told me, oh, you're gonna be one of Keith's dear friends when you grow up, I would have said, okay, which toes would you like me to cut off? You know, I would never have believed it.
Yeah.
You know? But that's funny about this business. And again, LA. Once you get here, all possibilities open up. You know, this town is insane for that.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have any good LA stories?
Do I have any good LA stories? Oh, well, I could tell that one. Do I have any good LA stories? I mean, other than seeing a UFO?
You saw a UFO.
I saw a UFO, yeah.
How do you know it was a UFO?
Put it this way, I'm an aviation nut. Have been since I was a kid. I can look up and I go, oh, that's an F-22 Raptor.
Wow.
You know, that's an F-16, that's a blah, 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 blah. And this thing went over 5 times, 10 times bigger than a 747.
Wow.
And I was in Encino, and I'm in a convertible with my girlfriend at the time. And I didn't say a thing. And I mean, I remember everything about it. The grain of the metal, it was so low. And I just decided I'm not going to say anything else. And I hear, did you see that? And I went, you saw it too? And she goes, yeah. And I said, you know what? We're really close to my house. And I said, when we get back there, we're going to both draw what we saw. And we both drew the exact same V-shaped with five lights on it. Huge, vastly huge, completely silent. So I filed a UFO report. This is early 90s. And the next night I'm at my studio and I'm working, kind of forgot about it. I look up at the TV screen and there's that shape and it says artist rendition. And I grab the remote and turn it up and it says, over 100,000 people sighted this object tonight in Phoenix. And it was the exact 5 lights, same shape that we had both drawn the night before. And they ended up making a movie about it called The Phoenix Lights.
Wow.
So, I don't know if that's an LA story. That's just an everywhere story.
Kind of.
But yeah, you know.
That's crazy and awesome. Anything can happen in LA.
Yeah, well, anything can happen anywhere.